This is episode 52 with Steve Lawrence.
Welcome to Spot On Insurance. My name is Ted Taveras. Join us each week as we speak to insurance professionals, attorneys, regulators, and compliance specialists on topics ranging from improving your agency to staying on the right side of the law. Subscribe and stay informed on the effects of new trends and disruptive emerging technologies on your businesses and your industry.
Joining me today is the Vice President of Licensing at AssuredPartners, Inc. In the last 16 years, Steve Lawrence has been performing all facets of licensing and regulatory compliance. His specialties include licensing producers, agencies, Secretary of State filings, annual reports, purchasing groups, and surplus lines. Steve, thanks for bringing your insights to Spot On Insurance.
Thanks for the invitation.
Well, Steve, I think I'd like to begin by exploring a little of your history. Tell us about your business journey.
Okay. I started out in the restaurant business and did a slight foray into banking. I handled a credit card system and met another restaurateur and worked for 20 years with him doing office managing, payroll, kitchen work, 2 hours a day there, kind of a jack of all trades. And when the restaurant shut down, I kind of put my resume out to everybody who would accept it. And I ended up getting a position with Chubb in their agency services department, handling licensing and appointments. And we started a subsidiary of Chubb Licensing Services from there. Ran that for a few years and left Chubb in 2010 to join AssuredPartners and Herbert L. Jameson. I've been going there ever since.
So you were part of Chubb Licensing when?
Chubb Licensing Services started around 2003 and it shut down around 2010.
You were there for the inception then or afterwards?
I was their initial employee.
Oh, really? Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, we worked a lot with Bob Hamburger. He has been a good friend. We've lost touch in the last couple of years, but hopefully he'll listen to this and give me a call.
Yeah, it'd be good.
Yeah. Very, very nice man. And we really did enjoy working with Chubb. That happened for a few years. In fact, Bob called us when they were about to push the button on going into licensing to see how we felt about it. Basically, we told them, hey, come on in. The water's fine. We're not afraid that we're going to lose business as a result. And after a few years, we continued our friendship. When it was all said and done and Chubb decided to close that side, we actually were the beneficiaries of a lot of the clients that you guys had who needed help at that point. So,
That's great.
It's been a wonderful relationship with Chubb and with the folks that you worked with. They still have a great place in my heart.
They taught me a lot, and they taught me a great deal about how to do business. It was good.
Currently, what are you doing?
Well, I handle the licensing for AssuredPartners Incorporated. We're a large retail agency. I consider us large.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, I handle the entity licensing, and I manage a team of 6 people that handle all the individual licensing for the AssuredPartners entities. We're all located across different offices across the country. And I handle all of the entity filings, Secretary of State filings, DBA filings, annual reports, any amendments, name changes, conversions, and then I also handle all the entity licensing in that manner as well. Should there be any affiliations or officer changes, we take care of all that as well.
Well, I think I'm going to have a couple of questions to ask you on that. And I'm going to test your knowledge on some of it. I'm sure that our audience will be grateful too. You handle the merger and acquisition side?
Well, I'm involved in that part as the acquisition is closed. I'm aware of the due diligence that they do during the acquisition itself. I come into the acquisition once it's done, basically letting them know either what entity they're going to be joining and what FEIN number and licenses they're going to be using. Or if we're picking up, as a stock purchase, we're picking up their entity licenses, I let them know how we'll be handling that and assisting them with the changes for the officers and all that as well.
In your experience, what's the difference between a merger and an acquisition?
I think the merger is a lot easier because you're basically just taking, let's say, a group of individuals who are already licensed and kind of know the product they're selling and moving them into an entity, whereas the acquisition, you're taking a stock purchase, you're acquiring everything you need to know, everything based like in the background of the licensing itself. So when processing renewals that you have the correct officers, correct producers affiliated to the license. It's more of a information gathering for an acquisition as it is a merger, I think, on my side at least.
So one is more complicated than the other?
Oh yeah. They're both complicated. Like I said, on my end, from my side of it, what I see, the acquisition side is probably the hardest, but most intricate.
Now, in doing so many M&A transactions, do you use your own roadmap? You have a step-by-step process that you can share with our listeners?
Actually, the mergers and acquisition team, they follow a format that Brown and Brown used to use. They're all former Brown and Brown people, and that's the process that they follow to do their due diligence and take care of the acquisition itself.
So, can you take us through roadmap, because there are so many compliance tasks that have to be handled during an M&A. For example, name approval at a DOI, name approval with SOS, new licenses,
Well,
license
that's if you're forming
cancellations.
a new entity. Yeah, if you're merging an office into an entity that's already formed, you don't have to worry about that part of it. If you're forming an entity, then yeah, you have to go, depending on the name, because in certain states you have to have the words insurance in the name, and then of course followed by agency, services, brokers, or something in that manner. You want to try to incorporate those words into the name so that the name approvals just go that much faster.
Tell me, how do you make sure that every component gets done?
I
A
don't
lot of
go to sleep.
pieces. A lot. Yeah, I was going to say there's a lot of pieces here.
Yeah, yeah. It's a lot of check, double check, and then triple check to make sure everything is going. And one of our hardest issues is when we acquire an office that they want to use their old entity's name as a DBA name.
Hmm.
So we have to make sure that they go back to the Secretary of State's office, change their old entity name so that it releases it at the Secretary of State's office to use as a DBA, and then in turn go to the insurance department to make sure they release the license name or change the license name to release the name for us to use as the DBA name on the license.
What's the process for setting up a certificate of merger with the Secretary of State, and how does that differ from entities that are acquired?
We don't really do a certificate of merger. When we merge an entity into us, that we basically let them know that you have to take your entity and dissolve the entity.
Hmm.
So basically, the old entity would no longer exist. Is basically what's supposed to happen.
Steve, annual return and minimum state franchise tax returns are still due until proper withdrawals are taken. In your role, do you have an opportunity to share that with the powers that be in your company? Let's say a transaction takes a year to close. Is there any monitoring of the entity that's being pursued?
Right now, with what I'm doing, I do have several entities in that process, and it's a constant process. I'm working with our tax accountant to try to get tax returns filed to satisfy the letter of good standing request with Rhode Island, for example. They will not release an entity until they have enlisted an active good standing status with the state. So our accountant went back to them basically saying we are a disregarded entity. Do we have to file these? Because as per federal law, disregarded entities don't have to file these annual returns or these franchise taxes. And Rhode Island basically came back and said, we don't follow the federal law. You need to follow the Rhode Island law, and you need to file your taxes. So we're
Yeah.
finding out stuff from 2009 through 2016 for the entities that we had that were withdrawing. So unfortunately, it's best to make sure you have your all of those and your reports, any returns or any franchise taxes filed well prior to your withdrawing of an entity, because they will not allow you to do anything unless the entity is in good standing in all departments of the state.
Yeah, one of the things that we do for mergers and acquisitions is to do those checks and balances to make sure that everything is good when that's going on. That's one of the services that ILSA provides.
It's a service I definitely could use. I'm not a tax guy.
But you were an accountant earlier on in your life?
A bookkeeper.
Bookkeeper.
Yeah,
Okay.
I did everything up to trial balance, and that was it.
How about the name changes during the M&A transactions? Can you talk to us about that?
Sure. Name changes are actually easier on our side. Basically, we let them know once they've been acquired, if they're going to be using their old entity name as a DBA name, that they are in charge of handling their entity name change. With us, we've actually had a couple of entities that have decided, we don't want to use our old name. We want to now have an AssuredPartners name. So we're in turn doing amendments for those as well. And a lot of those amendments can be done online. There's really not much to them.
Mhm.
And once that's done, usually everything follows suit in return to getting everything updated with the departments of taxation. The state follows through with that for you. And then we in turn take that information, go to the Department of Insurance to change the licenses.
Spot On is sponsored by Insurance Licensing Services of America. Need help with corporate name changes, annual returns, or surplus lines tax filings? Feeling overwhelmed? Well, if you're looking for experts in regulatory compliance, you've come to the right place. ILSA provides the industry with over 50 services. To learn more about the company and how they can help, visit ilsainc.com.
I know that the non-filings with the SOS and DOR can cause revocation of the certificate of authority, and they can also cause difficulty re-entering that state in order to do business in the future. During the M&A process that you are going through, are you finding that many of these filings fall through the cracks?
What we have found is that cracks were the tax filings. Everything else annual report-wise, most of our entities were in good standing with that, so that was great. But what we found out afterwards was getting the taxes, taking care of the franchise taxes. And on our side, it was deciding, okay, who's going to handle the franchise tax? Like, is it going to be the local office that handles it, or is it going to be the corporate office that handles it? So we decided it was going to be the local office.
Okay. Are you very familiar with the compliance at the SOS and DOR? How do mergers affect future annual report filings and corporate tax returns with the DOR?
Well, the tax returns I don't file, but on the Secretary of State side, basically when you're doing the annual report, because I've asked, like, should I go in and make the amendment now to the officers, or do I wait to the annual report to update the officers? And in most cases, if the Secretary of State person will tell you, like, don't submit an amendment into your certificate of authority. It's a lot of money, and it's not necessary. Wait till the next annual report and just change the officers in. So that's usually what I do.
That's good. That's good information.
Yeah, I found if you contact any either Department of State or the insurance department, you let them know, I'm completely new to this, completely blind. How can I get this to you to make it get done the right way the first time? And if you ask them that, they'll pretty much give you every step you need to take to get everything done.
For somebody who's new coming into the industry, that's good information. Does it always work?
No.
I thought so. Yeah,
because we all know you call the state and ask the same question with three different people, and you'll get three different answers. So,
well, you tell that to clients, and they kind of don't believe it. But the ones that do believe it are those that have tried doing that kind of stuff on their own, working with the states on their own, and they automatically can relate. In fact, they'll tell you a lot more horror stories usually than you can tell them, because when you know what you're doing in terms of licensing, regulatory compliance, there's a big difference from that person that comes in and falls into trap after trap. You may have a couple of little snafus or horror stories, but they're going to have so many to share with you.
Oh yeah,
and they also make for the best clients because they're just so happy to get that bear off their back.
Absolutely.
What kind of role does timing play in mergers and acquisitions? You have anything to share on that side? Experiences you've had?
I would say if you're going to be working anything in mergers and acquisitions, if you're going to be taking an acquisition and forming an entity to put the acquisition into, make sure you have your entities formed and licensed prior to doing that. We had an incident in California where we formed an entity in October. By mid-November, we were told they had to have the entity licensed as a resident in California by the end of December. And that gave me about 6 weeks to submit an application. And with California, we all know an application can take anywhere from 6 weeks to a year. So you still have applications pending for that long too. But with the help of the people in that office and a contact at the Department of Insurance, we were able to get the application walked through and issued in about 2.5 weeks. It was a saving grace on us for having that contact within their office, but it was 2.5 weeks of unnecessary aggravation, because had we just gone and done this prior, that acquisition would have been able to move right and seamlessly, and we would have had the issue that we started to have. We did end up alleviating the issue, but it didn't need to be there.
I would have to say amazing, because that's 2.5 in California, right?
Absolutely.
Wow, that's awesome. So my guest today has been Steve Lawrence. Steve, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining us on Spot On Insurance.
Thanks for the invite. It was great.
Visit spotoninsurance.com, where you discover an ever-growing library of podcasts, videos, articles, and online tools by professionals for professionals to enhance your insurance education. By the way, that's where you'll also find our podcast notes and bonus resources. Please don't forget to click the iTunes link to rate and review and let others know what you think of Spot On Insurance. Thank you for joining us, and we'll catch you next week.